The Challenger disaster. January 28, 1986. The Space Shuttle Challenger stood on the launch pad at Cape Canaveral, Florida. It was bitterly cold, the temperature near freezing. Inside the shuttle were 7 astronauts, including Krista McAuliffe, a 37-year-old high school teacher chosen to be the first civilian in space. Her presence had captured the imagination of the country. Millions of children were gathered in classrooms, watching the launch on television. At 11:38 a.m., Challenger lifted off the pad. The crowd cheered. The shuttle climbed into the sky, leaving behind a perfect white column of smoke. For 73 seconds, everything looked normal. Then a small flame appeared near one of the solid rocket boosters. Moments later, the shuttle disintegrated in the air into a white bloom spreading outward like a flower of smoke. The cheering stopped. Commentators fell silent. No one at first understood what they were seeing, but as the debris rained down, it became clear that Challenger was gone. All 7 crew members died instantly. The explosion was replayed across every news network for days, forcing a nation and especially its children to confront death live on television. The investigation later revealed that faulty O-ring seals had failed in the cold weather. A warning engineers had issued, but NASA ignored. The tragedy led to years of reforms in the shuttle program, but the image of that white cloud in the blue sky became one of the darkest symbols in American television history. Christine Chubbuck, July 15, 1974. A quiet morning newscast in Sarasota, Florida, turned into something unimaginable. Christine Chubbuck, a 29-year-old television reporter, had battled depression for years. That morning, she appeared calm as she read the news on air. Halfway through her script, she looked directly into the camera and said, "In keeping with Channel 40's policy of bringing you the latest in blood and guts and in living color, you are going to see another first. An attempted suicide." Then she produced a revolver and shot herself on live television. The broadcast cut to black within seconds, but the sound was unmistakable. Station workers rushed to her side, but it was too late. Christine died later that day at the hospital. Few people actually saw it live, but word spread instantly. The footage was never re-aired and remains locked away, but the event haunted every journalist who witnessed it. Lee Harvey Oswald, 24th of November, 1963. 2 days after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, millions of Americans tuned in to see his accused killer transferred from the city jail. Lee Harvey Oswald, a former Marine, was being led through the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters surrounded by cameras and reporters. As Oswald was escorted forward, a man suddenly stepped out of the crowd, a nightclub owner, Jack Ruby, and fired a single shot into his abdomen. Viewers at home saw the moment live. The suspect grimaced as police tackled Ruby to the ground. For a nation already reeling from Kennedy's murder, it was another trauma, broadcast in real time. It was one of the first televised killings with a large viewing in history and cemented a generation's distrust of official narratives. For many, the Oswald shooting marked the moment when television stopped being a window into events and became part of them. Bud Dwyer, January 22, 1987. Pennsylvania State Treasurer R. Bud Dwyer called a press conference at the state capitol. He was facing sentencing in a bribery case and maintained his innocence to the end. Reporters expected a resignation speech. Dwyer stepped to the podium, read from a prepared statement, then handed envelopes to his staff. He paused, looked at the cameras, and said, "Please leave the room if this will offend you." Before anyone could react, he drew a .357 Magnum revolver from a manila envelope and put it in his mouth. The gun went off instantly. Reporters screamed. The camera feed continued for several seconds before cutting away. Some stations accidentally aired the full incident. Others stopped just before the gunshot. Dwyer's death shocked the country and reignited debates about live delay systems, mental health, and the pressures of public scandal. The footage remains one of the most disturbing ever captured by a news camera. 9/11, the second plane. September 11, 2001. News networks interrupted regular programming to cover what appeared to be an accident. A plane had struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. Helicopters circled above as anchors speculated about mechanical failure. Millions watched, unsure of what had happened. Then, at 9:03 a.m., a second jetliner streaked into the frame and slammed into the South Tower. The explosion filled the screen with orange flame and black smoke. In that instant, everyone watching realized it wasn't an accident. It was an attack. What followed was hours of horror, smoke, falling debris, and people trapped above the flames making impossible choices. The images were replayed endlessly, but the shock, the silence, the disbelief became permanently etched into human memory. Ayrton Senna, May 1st, 1994. The Formula One world tuned in to the San Marino Grand Prix. Brazilian driver Ayrton Senna was at the height of his fame, a hero to millions. But that weekend had already been plagued by crashes. The day before, another driver had died during qualifying. When the lights went green, Senna took the lead. On the 7th lap, his car approached the high-speed Tamburello corner. At over 190 miles per hour, something went wrong. A steering failure or a sudden suspension break. The car went straight off the track and slammed into a concrete wall. The car shattered, the cockpit silent. Broadcasters cut between the wreck and the pit lane as emergency crews ran to the scene. For minutes, no one spoke. Then came the news. Senna's injuries were fatal. It was not just the death of a driver, but of a national icon. The tragedy led to sweeping safety changes in Formula One, but for those who saw it live, that single frame of a still helmet after impact remains impossible to forget. The WDBJ Shooting. August 26, 2015. Viewers in Roanoke, Virginia were watching a cheerful local news segment at a lakeside boardwalk. Reporter Allison Parker was interviewing a community guest as cameraman Adam Ward filmed. Then, without warning, gunfire erupted. The camera dropped. Screams filled the air. The broadcast cut back to the studio where anchors sat frozen in shock. The shooter was a former station employee who had been fired months earlier. He recorded his own video of the attack and posted it online moments later. Both Parker and Ward were killed at the scene. The footage of their final moments circulated globally before being removed. It was a modern horror. For journalists across the world, the WDBJ shooting was a grim reminder of how exposed live reporting had become. The 1972 Munich Olympics. September 5, 1972. The world was watching the Summer Olympics in Munich, Germany. That morning, 8 members of the Palestinian group Black September broke into the Olympic Village and took 11 Israeli athletes hostage. For the next 17 hours, negotiators tried to reach a deal. Millions followed every development, unaware that the coverage itself was being watched by the terrorists on nearby TVs. Late that night, the crisis moved to an airbase where the hostages and gunmen were to be flown out. German police attempted a rescue. The operation failed. Gunfire erupted. Explosions lit up the airfield. Reporters on live feed described chaos they didn't understand. By the time it ended, all 11 hostages were dead. The world had witnessed terrorism play out in real time. The live racing crash. 1955 Le Mans. June 11, 1955. More than 250,000 people filled the stands at the Le Mans racetrack in France. Millions more listened and watched updates through European television. During the third hour of the race, a collision on the straight sent Pierre Levay's Mercedes airborne. The car exploded into the grandstand, hurling flaming debris and engine parts into the crowd. Within seconds, hundreds were dead or injured. The race continued for hours, even as rescue teams worked in the stands. Officially, 83 spectators and the driver were killed. It was the worst disaster in motorsport history. It was a moment when the thrill of speed collided with the reality of death, broadcast to an audience that could do nothing but watch. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for similar ones and feel free to drop suggestions for the next video in the comments section.